And the open internet rules. In order to discuss this, I'm joined here by Peter Alexiadis, research fellow at the think tank CERE, Romain Bonenfant, general director of the French Telecom Federation, Dalia Coffetti, regulatory and EU affairs at the Italian Association of Internet Providers, and Thomas Lohninger, executive director of European Digital Rights at epicenter.works, and also non-residential fellow at CIS Stanford. Thank you. I'm going to ask you to maybe start with introductory remarks, presenting yourself, so that everybody in the room knows who you are, what you do, very quickly, and then we will start the discussion. Maybe starting with yourself, Thomas, can you present your work at epicenter.works very quickly? I give you a minute and a half, 2 minutes.
Yeah, so I try to be brief. Basically, we've been involved in net neutrality for many, many years. We started off actually in 2012 when sending party pay was discussed. So this idea of network fees had a very early start in 2012 already, and it was not adopted back then. We were involved in the open internet regulation, also ran the campaign safetyinternet.eu. I was at the time also working here in Brussels as policy advisor for EDRI, and we kept with the issue ever since. All of the BEREC reforms, we were very involved in the ECJ case that outlawed zero rating in Europe, also in the BEREC reform around 5G. Sometimes we do litigation. We've done so in Portugal, in Colombia, and right now in Germany. We are suing Deutsche Telekom because of their interconnection practices, together with the National Consumer Organization. And yeah, and the ongoing DNA debate, and previously also since 2022, since Breton started this, we also try to be a voice of reason from civil society, ensuring that net neutrality is upheld.
Dalia, coming back to you, can you also present your work at AIP, as we say for short, and the campaign called the Stop the DNA campaign?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the invitation. Well, for those who don't know IP, because we are new here in the EU bubble, IP is the first Italian ISP association, active since 1995, and for 30 years has contributed to the development of Internet in Italy and Europe. We are member of ECTA and founding member of EuroISPA. We count more than 60 providers, and our members are mainly very high capacity network access members, access providers with fixed and wireless technologies, data center provider, as well as the largest Italian cloud service providers. This summer, in parallel with the launch from the EU Commission of the Call for Evidence on the DNA, we launched this campaign to oppose the DNA, which is called Stop the DNA, because while a lot of supporters are arguing that the DNA claims to modernize regulation, simplification, foster investment, we believe that the DNA, as it's been shaping, could threaten the decades of progress in competition, infrastructure, and sovereignty in the European telco sector. Key concerns are essentially a shift toward oligopoly and concentration of control of network in just few major players, pushing smaller operators like our member into being mere resellers. Other problematic issues are that prices for internet and services could rise for everyone. There is a risk of centralized regulatory power in Brussels, pushing aside NRAs, a local body that for decades have ensured fair competition, consumer protection, and market balance. Last but not the least is that the DNA will not just touch upon major telco operators, but will have an impact on the entire ecosystem made of local ISPs, manufacturers, content providers, internet exchange point. So in a nutshell, well, the campaign is to say no to a new regime where few big players dominate the whole sector and where innovation shrinks. So we are asking for maintaining competition and fair prices for citizens and end users.
Okay, thank you very much for this complete description. Maybe coming to you, Romain, so the Fédération Française des Télécoms represents the three biggest players in France. I won't ask you about whatever's happening with buying not SFR, but more on present the telecom operator's perspective on the open internet, because this is the topic of a debate, and maybe also a few words on fair share.
So thank you very much, and thank you for having me. Thanks to the CCIS. So yes, the French Telecom Federation is representing the telecom operators in France. Not only three big operators actually, but we have 25 members of all sizes, active on B2B, B2C market, all different types of activities on the telecom market. So very different approaches. So let me start with the fair share debate. The perspective on our members on this is actually a general issue on how the internet economics work. The internet economics as we know it today is coming from the origin of the internet. The origin of the internet, as we all know in this room, is actually starting from universities, research centers, individuals, researchers connecting. And they were more or less equal. I mean, the traffic was relatively balanced, and there was no need to bother with accounting, tracking flows, and having sort of commercial agreements on this. And that was very fine. And today, it's still a very good model for most of the internet. In our view, this model should be preserved at all costs, and is actually still valid for, I would say, more than 99.999, take really the number of 9 new ones, % of the internet users. But we have to face reality. And reality is that internet has changed. We are witnessing in our network traffic coming from a handful of players who is actually growing and generating the need to do specific investment to accommodate this growth. So these players who actually account for, I would say, 50% of the traffic in general in France, probably more than 80% if you look at peak hours for mobile in dense areas, for example. This handful of players have a different role. In our view, they should have a specific responsibility to have some sort of traffic efficiency and to have a capacity to make the right decision in the service they deliver. They are different because when they design their services, when they choose the type of compression for video, for example, when they choose to preload videos on a video portal, they have a direct effect on actually what the telecom operators have to invest in their network. And this is the whole issue of fair share, a price signal to achieve traffic efficiency. So this is what we are defending. And maybe coming back to what Maria Teresa said in the beginning, that we need to have regulation only what is wanted, when there is a market failure. Indeed, there is a market failure here. And why? Because we have regulation on the open internet, regulation which only applies to the telecom operators. We love this regulation. We wouldn't want to change a comma of it, but it only applies to telecom operators. So what we want to have, actually, this type of pricing of traffic flows is to extend the open internet rules to these major traffic providers.
Thank you very much. Peter, now is your turn. Can you maybe present us who you are, of course, and the study you co-authored for Sarah with Plum on the IP interconnection market?
Yeah. Okay. Hi, nice to be here. Nice to see so many familiar faces. My disappointment is that AI can't make me look any thinner, but hopefully someone in this room can work on that. You know, and let's get real. But moving on, I'm a practitioner for 34 years in Brussels, working on competition and regulatory issues in telecoms and digital platform issues. I assisted the Commission when we formulated the current regulatory framework back in 1998 for 2002, and then I have also assisted in the regulation of digital platforms. Currently, working for Sarah, we did a series of studies on looking forward towards deregulation, possibilities for deregulation. We endorsed a number of the principles, in parallel, by the way, that the Draghi report introduced in terms of making the burden lighter and so forth. That doesn't mean to say that we agree with all the principles. In retrospect, I think we possibly didn't do what we should have done, which was to say that, you know, if you push on the mergers lever, you don't push on the regulatory lever at the same time. We portrayed different options available to regulators without sort of saying that, well, you can't have both. You either go for one or you go for the other. And in retrospect, it would have been nice to have done that, but if you read the report, you'll see that we are advocating a loosening of certain regulatory norms, not fundamental ones like access and so forth. Then to Plum Consulting, where we looked at the IP interconnection issue and whether or not there is validity in going towards a dispute settlement procedure. And there, do I have 30 seconds?
Yeah, still.
Yeah. And there we looked at the validity of an IP dispute resolution issue in the context of IP interconnect. And my role in that was the legal side, and my conclusions were that IP interconnect is not amenable easily to a dispute resolution type scenario. It doesn't fit any of the traditional boxes that we as lawyers feel comfortable about using for dispute settlement. It's not between adversaries. It's not between people who are likely to disagree on contract. It's not likely to be addressing a clear and well understood market failure. It's not likely to be suppressing market power. Therefore, on balance, there's no need for it, because the only reason it would be used would be to be gamed by people who have the last mile to constantly create disputes. And it's the easiest thing in the world to create a dispute. The reality is we've found that given how long the internet has been functioning, for the amount of time it's been functioning, that the number of disputes that have really occurred, that have manifested themselves in any meaningful way, is trivial. And in an environment in which we are looking towards less regulation, more streamlined regulation, the idea of increasing regulation in this particular way is nonsense, quite frankly. And on top of that is likely to lead to a lot of collateral damage, some of which we understand, much of which we don't understand. We're in the Donald Rumsfeld known unknowns. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to come back to this, but because this panel is about the open internet, I'm going to start with questions on the open internet. And so I've asked myself a very silly, stupid question, I guess, which is, will the DNA actually reopen the open internet? And actually, the Commission doesn't say that very clearly. The operators, when they answered to the public consultation on the DNA, didn't say that as well. I'm failing to see a clear push for revising the rules. What there is for sure is a discussion on we need an update of the rules for these new specialized services, especially 5G slicing, so using one slice of 5G for B2B services and then keep the rest for the internet as we know it with the open internet rules. So in a way, the Commission is agreeing with that. So is there really an issue here that the open internet rules are really being threatened currently and in the DNA that's going to be tabled in 2 months? What do you think, Thomas?
I wish this were not the case. I really would like us not to revisit the open internet regulation, because this means a lot of work for me and for everyone. And the uncertainty this will entail is really not what we need right now. But sadly, it's absolutely certain for me that we have to prepare for this. Not just because actually the telecom industry is calling for that. Some of my FOIA requests that are public at Ask the EU clearly show ETNO members calling for this. And if you take the call for evidence together with the questionnaire for the impact assessment, and we also had discussions with the Recurrence people, they at least want to harmonize it. So I expect the open internet regulation to be included in the DNA and thereby opened up for amendments. That surely will happen because we know who the players are, in Parliament at least. And there's also an obvious push to make carve-outs for 5G. So we will have to revisit the whole specialized service debate, which is also crazy because a decade ago under Commissioner Günther Oettinger, we had all of these debates and came to a good conclusion. And yet in Europe, actually, it has worked quite well. There was a lot of legal clarity, and those magical, innovative services around 5G, yeah, they haven't happened in Europe, but they also haven't happened in Asia. They also haven't happened in other regions, like the US, that no longer have a net neutrality framework. So it's really betting a lot of what has worked in the best effort open internet for magical thinking. And I think that is not evidence-based policy making. And yeah, other things are at stake as well. I mean, I wouldn't exclude the risk of the zero rating prohibition to be opened up. That is purely resting on case law from the ECJ. So many of these things are up for grabs now. And net neutrality will also be directly affected with any form of interconnection regulation. Also, as you put it, let's keep the rules as they are, but do what Italy did, just open them up also, not to be between ISPs, but also between ISPs and CAPs. That will lead to exactly the same thing. And we can demonstrate in Germany the harm this will cause for consumers. Hence, we and the consumer protection organizations sued against Deutsche Telekom, because we can demonstrate that the freedom of choice is restricted, that startups are asked to pay enormous amounts of money. Like we have cases of startups that are asked to pay 3-4-figure amounts a month, and otherwise their users from Deutsche Telekom complain to them that their service isn't working. And this trickles down also from the small hosters. So there's actually already this risk that we see with the very large telecom operators, that they are abusing their termination monopoly. And if we don't intervene here, what we are doing is we are applying the open internet regulation on the interconnection market, which is something that BEREC clearly highlighted as a regulatory option in their December 2024 report. And then maybe also to conclude, like this idea of network fees, how reasonable it is, how maybe good or necessary it is. Let me just start with the high-level amounts. We have, I think, in total 8 BEREC opinions against this, only 4 in this ongoing debate since 2022. We have the competition authorities of several countries saying this would be a really bad idea, please go away. And also the media regulators that are warning this would be bad for media plurality. So I think that the picture is very clear what the harms are, and I have yet to be convinced why we need this.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack, I guess, more than just open internet. Maybe I want to give you a chance to answer whether, as is written in the answers to the public consultation, operators want an update or a full renewal of the rules, but also answer to this claim that it's also very possible that if there is a reopening of the open internet, then there might be amendments to do more and include zero rating, for instance.
No, to be very clear, and maybe clarify again what I said in the introduction, we do not want to change the rules of open internet as they apply to telecom operators today. We're very fine with the rules. As in, we are in a technologically evolving sector. Of course, there are new questions, there are novel issues we have to look at. 5G slicing is clearly one of them, but this can be clarified through guidance from the Commission. You don't need to reopen open internet rules, and clearly we do not want that. The point we're making in relation to the fair share debate is actually, I hear the whole question of market power on the termination line and so on, but frankly, when you look at the situation today, the fact that we have is very stringent open internet rules at the level of telecom operators and how internet economics works today, I think the issue of market power is not on the side of telecom operators. And actually, this is why there are no disputes at all. This is why we don't see this dispute resolution actually appearing in the market, because it's just impossible to negotiate. How can a telecom operator today negotiate with one of the 4 or 5 large traffic generators, because these large traffic generators can retaliate. They can change the quality of service of actually what they provide to the consumer. They can discriminate between the different telecom operators, the service they provide. They can change the tarification based on the condition of actually interconnection with the different operators. It's not fantasy, it's just what happened in South Korea. In South Korea, a tarification has been applied through a court on a specific operator. As a result, there were clear retaliation measures from a number of service providers, degrading the quality of service for users. So actually, the threat for users today is on the side of large large traffic generators, and this is in this area where we need additional rules. Does that mean technically reopening the open internet regulation? I don't know. It can be done in different ways, but we need a framework to have commercial agreements between telecom operators and service providers. There are already hints for it in this regulation. If you look at recital 7 of this regulation, actually there are some flavor of this commercial agreement, the fact that there needs to be some supervision of a public authority, and so on and so on, and this is what we should build upon.
I see. I'm going to give you a time to answer as well, but first I want to ask Peter, do you see, because you worked on these topics, a business case for 5G slicing? As Thomas said, he's not sure he believes in it.
Well, it's an interesting question. This is my personal view. I believe there was a case for 5G slicing had we prepared for it earlier. I think the market has moved on very, very quickly to the point now that if there is slicing, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be, there might be very, very little take-up of it, because already there are alternative models out in the marketplace, which means that 5G slicing might not be interesting from a demand point of view anymore. So the chance was there. I think maybe from a commercial point of view, the chance is gone. But that's not to say that we shouldn't give the opportunity to do so, because I think it's something that can be policed by regulators pretty well. So yes, allow it. If traditional telcos can't take it up and can't take advantage of it, despite telling us for years that they could, well, that's their problem, I think. That's one point. On net zero, it's my personal view again, I think the court went too far, and I think coming back and modifying net zero and allowing it in certain circumstances is probably okay, as long as we understand what situations there are there. The court went too far.
Can you define what zero rating is or net zero? Because I'm not sure everybody
knows.
Everybody knows.
Okay. Everybody knows. So I think that and then when it comes to the IP interconnect, like I said, I think that's a different issue. I think there's a lot of collateral damage out there to the whole internet ecosystem, some of which we clearly understand, some of which we clearly don't understand the magnitude of. There will be an impact on price, because it'll filter through the whole system. There will be an impact on quality. And when we turn this discussion about Korea, was it a question of the caps or the CDNs degrading quality, or was it a question of the caps and the CDNs migrating their connectivity outside Korea to avoid the high charges, which then led to the degradation? So it's cause and effect. I take the view that it's the latter, not the former. They didn't degrade the quality of their own product. The degradation occurred because of the circumvention, or in the old days we used to call it in telecoms, tromboning.
I guess technically you could do that as a content provider. You could downgrade the quality of your service, but I mean this is a question that is technical. I'm not sure. I guess the court didn't judge on this anytime soon. So I guess we can have both views on this discussion. Maybe I wanted to go to you, Dalia, with the same question, because you also represent internet providers. Do you see a case for 5G slicing and therefore a case to amend the open internet rules?
Yeah, we don't see a case for 5G slicing because it's just one of the many techniques to manage data traffic. And yeah, we can reduce the whole debate of open internet on 5G slicing, as well as we don't see a specific need to open the open internet rules, and access to the internet should be best effort. Every other promotion or offers should be treated separately and sell on top of the best effort. So for us, there's no case on 5C slicing.
I see, Thomas, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I think it's important to clarify what the current regulatory situation is if we discuss any movement away from it. Right now, we have clarity on 5G, and you're free to provision any type of network slice as long as the user is in control which applications that network slice is using. That is what BEREC gave us with the 2020 guideline reform. So yes, you are free to innovate, but the users who are ultimately also paying for the 5G are the ones who should decide which apps get to use it. Similarly to zero rating, you are completely free to adopt any type of application agnostic zero rating model. The code was very clear. You could have night times off when the network is idle anyway. You could not deduct that from monthly data caps. As long as the user is in charge, everything is fine. And on the question of interconnection, let's not kid ourselves. No video streaming provider is sending you a 4K video just because they're funny. It's a user who has clicked this. A subscriber from the ISP who is paying for that connection has requested the data. And yes, we have a market concentration there. And I agree with you that this is a problem and big tech should be split up. But German Monopoly Commission, Austrian Bundeswettbewerbsbehörde, and many other competition authorities looked at this. This is not the way to go here. So the users are the ones who are requesting that traffic, and the CAPs are the ones who are serving that. You mentioned incentives for traffic efficiency. The CAPs have an incentive to not cloud up the network of the ISPs, because they also have to pay for their traffic. They also have servers, and we've seen over the past decade so many inventions here in terms of encoding and reducing the efficiency. It takes so much fewer bandwidth today than it did a few years ago to serve live video content. And that's good, because we all have an incentive to be efficient with the traffic that we consume. I mean, it's not really consumable, but nevertheless, it's a utilization of a resource. And therefore, I really don't see why this new model of changing the network topology would actually make sense. Because right now, what is the current model? For all but just a very few big ISPs, how do you connect with other networks? You usually have many connections, many peering connections, and usually those are settlement-free. BEREC found this over and over again. Settlement-free peering is the standard. And it's also the most efficient and best way to connect networks. And then you have... Should I explain?
Standard, of course, for sure. Absolutely, for 99.999...
Exactly.
How many... As many nines as you want, % of the cases. But it's also true that content providers, which are a handful, provide more than 50% of the traffic. So even though the thousands and millions of other persons who are using the internet, you don't pay, and that's all right. There's maybe a question here. A handful of players are sending 60% of the traffic on the networks. So there's maybe a need to intervene here.
Again, like, it is the user with their paying subscription who is requesting that. And on the solution, in my opinion, we have something, it's called transit. And the big distinction between the networks that are abusing their termination monopoly and those who are not doing this is whether or not their transit connections are working. And if your transit is constantly over capacity, then you are creating this artificial scarcity that allows you to extort this type of money. And we would rather have freedom of choice where it doesn't matter which hoster you have and how that concrete connection towards the ISP, which users you want to serve, is working at this moment. Because this decentrality and redundancy is really what made the internet so vibrant.
I see.
Maybe to come back to the question of the user. You're perfectly right, the user clicks. But what is happening after that click? It's not the user who decides, it's actually the service provider. The fact that, for example, when you go to any video portal, sometimes you have preloading of video in very high quality and so on. This is sort of wasted traffic. It's not our place to judge. But we are just saying that as there is no price signal whatsoever to the service provider, of course, it should provide gold-plated experience. It can enrich its services with no limits whatsoever and so on. And actually, the situation will become worse and worse when we will deploy gigabit everywhere in Europe, because currently the actual limit is that if a service provider is actually serving only 4K videos, in some part of Europe it won't work. Okay? But once we have achieved a very high level of connectivity, it will be a different case. So there is really a lack of incentive to have an efficient management of traffic at the level of service provider. And this actually comes to the question of what investment are we talking about when we discuss about the specific investment generated by the traffic of these few large traffic generators. Actually, more than 80% of it is in the access network. So the transit issue, in our view, is off topic. The problem we have very concretely in our network is that we have to deploy, for example, new mobile sites in dense area in France because we have this increase of traffic, and this increase of traffic is clearly caused by the behavior of a few large traffic generators. Let's come back to the highway metaphor we like very much in the first panel. Let's imagine that on a highway you have 4 or 5 companies sending tons of lorries on the highway and congesting the highway. The question we have, similar to the fair share, is who would pay to enlarge the road? Is it to the highway provider? Should it be passed on to any user to actually subsidize these 4 or 5 companies? Or is it to these companies? This is the quick question of fair share.
Yeah. Made me think of Waze and the issue they had with traffic routes that were going through villages in France and destroying the roads. But let's not continue with the analogy. You wanted to come in, Peter?
Yeah, I wanted to say a couple of things. I wanted to say to everybody who leaves this room, when you go down the street and you go past the Proximus store, have a look at what Proximus is advertising for you. They're advertising for you the fact that you can get, not that you can get broadband, the fact that when you get broadband, you get access to all this wonderful content, all these nasty big content providers. So they're driving demand, they're driving the product, and they're the bad guys. Sorry, I can't see that. I really can't see that. Are they changing the mechanics of how you do work your network? Maybe they have. Let's look at the empirical data. But the data is also clear that the big content providers, the CDNs, the CAPs, they are spending 5 billion per annum, according to Analysis Mason, per annum to get their networks closer to the end consumer, i.e. limiting all the traffic, limiting all the excessive use of capacity, etc., etc. So it works 2 ways. They're investing, they're getting closer to the customer, and secondly, the product, the fundamental product, is the product that's driving demand on their networks, on the networks of telcos. So you can't have it both ways and every way.
I find it quite interesting what you just said, that content providers are investing in CDNs, because I believe at the time we had this discussion around fair share in 2022, when there was still a former Commissioner Breton in charge. CCIA Europe published a press release that I have here, 13 October 2022, you can look it up on the internet, which says tech firms invest 22 billion per year in internet infrastructures. And it made me wonder, with this argument of saying that we also invest in telecom infrastructure, didn't he come up to the mind of a commission thinking, oh, well, if content providers invest in infrastructure that they consider telecom, shouldn't they be regulated as well? Do you think that's how they might have thought? And then came up with an IP regulation mechanism?
So we regulate everybody.
Yes.
So we regulate everybody in the value chain. I don't think that's a viable option. And also, the other point I forgot to mention, the open network regulation does allow the ability of telcos to deal with capacity constraints if they're technical. Okay, you have that ability. It's not as if there's no ability there, and we're talking about Brave New World. There is an option there, but prove it. Don't just allege it, prove it.
Maybe the Commission will prove it to us. They are currently ongoing the impact assessment through the scrutiny board, so we'll see quite soon, I guess. I have another question. If I take the consumer perspective, sometimes I wonder, net neutrality rules, when it was created, it was created with a clear view of allowing end users to access any type of content in the internet in the same way. But now, if I think of like what is the main window to the world in the internet at the moment, it's not anymore having a broadband connection. It's TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, etc., etc. And if we look at the regulation that the EU has put in place on these companies, mainly the DSA and the DMA, to actually create some kind of net neutrality or content neutrality, the EU is having quite a hard time to implement these rules. So when I hear telecom operators saying we basically want a net neutrality extended to content providers, I also feel like there is something from the end user perspective that actually makes sense. Thomas?
Yeah, but it really makes no sense to use the same framework on both of us. And we've worked on the DSA. We were quite aware of the problems in content governance and on the market concentration. But I can tell you that net neutrality simply does not provide you the tools to adequately address these problems. And we don't have better enforcement if we make the rules more complicated. And there is really a big gap of enforcement on data protection, on many elements, but also on net neutrality. I mean, we still have some grandfathered zero rating products out there in the EEA. So it's not as if all regulators are really doing their job properly. I think the user perspective is important, and net neutrality is something that the EU was very proud to adopt, and many users take for granted now because it is an expression of how to implement freedom of speech, how to have the freedom to innovate. And I think European businesses would absolutely not understand why there's suddenly a way to pay for privileged access. Ultimately, the lack of net neutrality always comes down to this question. The big tech companies will be happy to pay the toll. And for Deutsche Telekom, they are already doing it. It's the smaller providers that cannot afford these fees. And they will have the complaints from users. Our submission to Bundesnetzagentur has many of those. And just need to touch on two things, like this whole question of 50% of the traffic comes from big tech. Those are aggregated numbers globally. If you look in any individual country, you'll see that there are hosters, there are public and private broadcasters, there are porn websites that make up an awful lot of traffic as well. And even if you say, yeah, but it's only those VLOPs, the big tech companies, according to the DSA, I mean, German public broadcasters are hosting on Google, or we have many e-government services on Microsoft's cloud. So there is simply not this attribution that's not so straightforward. Yeah, Disney at the beginning of the network fee debate did not operate its own network, and would they not pay? You know, is Disney not too big to pay? Like, it simply does not work. And if you then use privacy technologies like a VPN or Apple Privacy Relay, you're completely outside of any calculation as well. Would then the VPN provider or Apple have to pay for all the traffic from iPhones? So I know it might sound logical at the beginning, but for anyone working with the networks, anyone with a bachelor's degree in engineering or in economics, this will be laughed at. I know that Brussels right now is having a debate for many years around this issue, and many people have been convinced over the year, but there's a reason why Thierry Breton was laughed at in council when he proposed this. Because once you talk with affected companies and other institutions, they all tell you it's crazy. And I'm sorry to say, but this whole DNA reform, I'm with you. Let's really scale it down, because it will be a failure. And last point, if we really open up the open internet regulation, I'm very clear on the historical example I'm going to quote. Donald Trump's first term. He's the only one who dared to repeal net neutrality. Is this the example that Henry Virkunen wants to follow?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a chance to answer.
To be clear again about what we want regulation or rules which are as light touch as possible. Concretely, it means having an obligation for large traffic generators to negotiate in good faith, so good faith obligation for this negotiation, which do not happen today. 2, to have open internet rules extended to the service level, not to have the possibility to discriminate between the different networks. And 3, the possibility to have a dispute resolution mechanism with an independent arbitrator, which could be the national regulatory authority. So we want something which is as close as possible from the commercial world. In the end, we want just commercial agreements between telecom operators and large service providers that would solve our issue. And actually, this is needed because of the rules we have on the telecom market. It's actually the economic side on what we have on the telecom market. We have very strong regulation on competition. That's very good. We have open internet rules. This is very good. But this is because of these 2 reasons that commercial agreement cannot happen magically, because our hands are tied. We do not ask to untie our hands. We just ask to have a negotiation at arm's length with the service providers. Coming back just maybe very quickly to the argument that in the end, these service providers, which are not villain or bad guys, or we work with them on a number of issues, we're just saying there is a lack of a price signal somewhere in the market, are creating value to the users and ultimately are actually driving the value in the telecom market. I think all the persons in the room in the telecom sector know that actually value has been decreasing. When you look at prices in telecom for telecom services in France, it has decreased by 10% in 10 years. In nominal terms, you look at real value, it has fallen down by like 25, 30%. So if it is a result of value creation by service providers, I would say they have destroyed value in our market. Of course, that's absurd. It's not the case, because there is no link between the value created by service provider and direct impact on our market. Actually, if you look at the economics of revenue of telecom operator, it's based on the number of users. It's not based on traffic. It's not based on bandwidth. Traffic and bandwidth are driving our costs, not our revenues. So this is the issue at stake. We are saying our revenue are constrained, our costs are going up because of specific investment we have to make for these traffic generators, and this is where we need some sort of commercial agreements.
Okay. I want to come back to something you said, quoting your latest, an approach of a latest rules regime, because something like that just happened in Italy, and maybe, Dalia, you want to talk about that, this Italian case of a AGCOM regulator who decided to regulate CDNs as telecom infrastructure following a very Italian case of football matches that which streaming quality was quite bad. Maybe you want to come in.
AGCOM, the Italian national regulation of communication, published its decision after a public consultation run this spring that stated that CDNs are now considered electronic communications network. But this decision, I think, dates back to 2020-2019 when DAZN brought the exclusive right to broadcast Italy's Serie A football matches. The first year was a disaster because when fans tune in, many couldn't even watch the game. So the Italian Italian AGCOM stepped in, ordering DAZN to fix its streaming problems. And to fix it, DAZN created its own content delivery network called DAZN Edge. But after this private CDN, AGCOM decided that DAZN should operate under the telco general authorization regime. So in this year, the Italian authority thought to recreate a level playing field among CDNs providing services in the Italian market, and that's why we arrived to this decision in August. Now, it's up to the MIMIT, the Ministry of the Industrial Development and Made in Italy, to set the condition for CDNs to apply for general authorization regime. We are aware that this decision created a lot of debate in Italy and here in the EU bubble, because it could create a backdoor for the reintroduction of a fair share through the IP dispute resolution mechanism. But I would like to hear your view. Yeah?
Let me say that we asked Agicom because we wrote a great piece about this case on Euractiv website, and they completely deny it.
Yesterday they were in Naples for a seminar on piracy and piracy shield. So Capitanio, which is the one that deals with the CDN, was there. Maybe it's for this reason is not here, but I'm sure that this topic is a bit, it's sort of a slippery slope for them, because they don't want to talk about it, because they are reducing everything to piracy and maybe force CDNs to comply with the piracy shield, but maybe they have not seen that this could lead to a backdoor for fair share and network fees.
I see. Thank you. You wanted to come in at some point?
Yeah, I mean,
yes?
the dangers with the Italian approach, and sympathy there, because if there's two things that are sacred in Italy, it's football and pasta. So you can imagine what a difficult decision it would have been here. But the danger here is that the CDNs get classified as public electronic communications networks. Electronic communications networks, I don't think too many people in this room would say, oh, I'm very upset if they're classified as electronic communications networks, but it's public. And I don't think they're public, because if they are public, then we're in a whole world of pain at EU regulatory level. If we want to deregulate, and we say that those sorts of services are to the public at large, then 3/4 of the people in this room are probably public electronic communications network operators for whatever they do. So that's a slippery slope that we don't want to go down. Tough cases make bad law, so the background is there, and I'm sure the Commission is going to, look at this very, very, very carefully. But going back to fair share, let's look at the policy debates. And I don't want to sound too harsh on this, but I probably have to be. It started off in the good old days back in Dubai, where we said network sending party pays. Rejected. Then it went to fair share. Rejected. Now we've got IP interconnection, which will inevitably, if it goes in, because of the gaming aspect, which I mentioned, it'll lead to basically fair share network sending party pays. So credit to the telecoms industry in the sense that they are environmentally sensitive, because they keep recycling the same argument. But they do call it something different, so that the pig has red lipstick the first time, blue, and then now mauve, possibly. It's the same pig, though, okay? It doesn't matter what you call it. It's the same argument. It's, the internet has changed, somebody else is making a lot of money out of it. How do we get a bit of that? That's not the sound basis for regulation. Sorry, it's not. There are no entry barriers to telcos. And, at the end of the day, if the knock-on effect to the rest of the industry, to the rest of the internet ecosystem is as wise as it's going to be, telcos should be careful about what they want. You can imagine Musk, someone like Musk, just saying, I've got satellites, I'll buy a bit of content, I'm just going to come be a European operator, or I'll just do it all through wireless. In terms of capacity. Yeah, they can do it. So don't, you're in a great situation. You're the conduit between the end user and the content provider. They've got the content, you've got the customer, you're doing very nicely here. Don't try to make it so difficult for the content provider to sort of approach the consumer indirectly through you. You are the retailer. You are the independent retailer. You are remunerated for what you do. You're not the agent of the content provider, or you're not their agent, so you're not them. So take your profits where they are and don't try to multiply the profits as often as you can throughout all levels of the value chain. That's what I'm trying to say. It's just like somebody else is making money, I've got to have a bit of it. That doesn't sound right. And talk about asking for trouble in terms of trade wars. That's the biggest one, because that's sticking out so obviously as being rapacious. I don't want to go into it any further, but don't give the Oval Office excuses to run roughshod over us. This is an item where I think it's going to be a really bad one to pursue.
I'm going to give you a minute because we need to take a question from Slido, but yes, please go on.
Yeah, just to, we know that the world of hot air is economically, is environmentally friendly, but if you look at reality, I mean, the point is we have to make real investment in access, which is linked to this incremental traffic. If you look actually, we made a study on France actually, and in total we find that actually the incremental increase in traffic of these 4 or 5 global players amount to roughly 15% of our investment. So the question is not, we have a lot of investment to make, so let's find someone to pay. It's just to say, so large traffic generator generate a specific cost in our network and they have to pay for it. That's it.
And I think I was looking at the economic model of fair share. The Toulouse School of Economics published a report back in 2022, and they were saying that the right way to do fair share would be to have it on advertisement only, and then if you would do it in the right way, then the price of subscriptions to telecom operators would drop. So maybe that's an economic model to look at for. I want to take one question from Slido. Sorry, Thomas. I have a question saying an estimated 24% of bandwidth is being used to deliver pirated or infringing content. If you want to free up bandwidth, so I guess it's for you, Romain, will you support EU legislation to tackle piracy?
Well, we have a lot of national legislation on it because, as you may know, the right holders in France are very, very active. So daily we take down a number of websites. We have a lot of activities, for example, on online piracy for live sport events, for example, when we are blocking many sites. So we are doing it already. So it can be at EU level, but I must say we have already very good national legislation on this.
Okay. Thomas is
yeah. On the piracy question, just briefly, I think the main reason is just that we have too many streaming services and people cannot afford 10 subscriptions. That's why privacy is increasing again. So I think we should tackle that and not in any traffic capacity. And the other thing that I just wanted to mention is just a few years ago, when zero rating was still allowed, all of this traffic that's now clouding up the network, and as you said, traffic drives our cost, not our revenue. So many ISPs in Europe had zero rating offers. Very often you do not even have to pay to have certain apps zero rated. We actually did a complete survey in 2017 which apps are zero rated, and the majority of them are exactly the big tech companies that they are now complaining about. So why could we see from 2016 till 2022 the majority of YouTube traffic, from Facebook traffic and so forth, we have seen zero rating products all over in all but 2 European countries. And now, while zero rating is outlawed, suddenly that same traffic that was just subsidized has become this major problem for network operators. I don't understand the economics here.
That's actually a question. Maybe I don't want you to answer, but very quickly, that's something I've been asking myself. If we have fair share and the end of the open internet, then very probably we will have deals between content providers and operators. But will we then be in a situation where the end user will have to pay a subscription to an operator and get free use of TikTok, free use of Instagram, and actually, be completely trapped in this, in having a door to only one type of contract that is actually, a addictive, some say, harmful, some others say, and actually be in a situation that will be far worse off. That's a question for you first, Romain. Maybe
well,
you, Peter.
It's not what we want for us. Fair share and what I try to describe is a wholesale issue. It's not a retail issue. It should not have consequences whatsoever on the user, very clearly. Regarding the possibility to discriminate at the retail level, the question of caps you mentioned also rightfully, Thomas. In fact, when you look at how markets work today, there is, for example, in the mobile, envelope-based competition. Competition is so hard in France, it's impossible to have a, I would say, meaningful cap on mobile. The meaning cap in France for mobile subscription are 100 gigabytes, 200 gigabytes. People consume like 17 gigabytes, I think, today on average. So it's not really volatile. It's impossible. There's too much competition downstream.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. So we are almost done. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds each. And because I come from the business side, I was a consultant before, I love this type of question. So imagine you're at the European Parliament, you just met an MEP, suddenly you take the elevator, the elevator opens, ding, Henna Virkkunen is inside. You got 30 seconds with her to tell her what should be inside the DNA. What do you say? Peter, you're up. 30 seconds, come on. I am Henna Virkkunen, I'm waiting.
Hello, Commissioner. It's a lovely day, isn't it? No, look, I'd say don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. The regulatory framework has worked very nicely. It needs tweaking. It needs a few bold ideas. We need to understand that access is more important than ever if we are going to push consolidation, more than ever, because that's the trade-off. You can't have both. I don't think that's right. We should be realistic with what we can achieve with spectrum policy, and we should think about really trying to possibly even emulate what the energy sector does and allowing a percentage of spare capacity available for trans-European traffic. Because if that occurs, then we might actually get what we keep on talking about but keep on failing to do, which is to get European-level markets in some form of telecommunications.
Okay. Thank you. Great. Romain, 30 seconds. I'm seeing the seconds now, so I'm going to stop you.
So, I would say that Internet should not only become a distribution channel for a handful of global players, and unfortunately this is where we're heading, with investment actually being captured by this player from operators, and actually we need this investment in coverage of rural area, in sovereignty, resilience, cybersecurity, and so on. And so the DNA is actually the opportunity to fix this issue, and for that we need to put in place a framework to allow for fair negotiation between telecom operators and the service players.
5 seconds. Great. Thank you very much. Dalia, you're up.
Dear Commissioner, I would say keep the ex-ante regulatory framework and avoid any shift toward concentration. Our SMEs are the backbone of European economy, and we don't need a few European champions in the telco sector, which has been successful for the last decades. And second point, we must say no to traffic discrimination, no traffic metering and pay-per-use. So preserve net neutrality because it's a toolbox to protect and guarantee other fundamental rights.
Thank you very much. Thomas, you're up.
Dear Commissioner, great to see you again. I have to tell you, you're being lied to. Everyone outside the bubble sees this, and you don't want to be laughed at like Mr. Breton. This is really not standing up to scrutiny. A BA in engineering or economy suffices to see that. Please don't take away rights from people. They will not like their freedom of choice being reduced or their prices going up. Competition is what actually made European telecoms great. It's stupid not to learn from your mistakes. It's even stupider not to learn from your successes. And you will be compared to Donald Trump if you open up the open internet regulation.
Okay, thank you very much. And then in this note of being compared to Donald Trump and Thierry Breton, I'm sure she would love that. We are taking a short 15 minutes coffee break, and we reconvene right here in 15 minutes for the third panel.